Hello, this is GGED Podcast. What do you want?
I'm Ethan Francis, and I'm calling from Linfield High School doing the school project. And I was wondering if you guys know what happened at the break-in at Watergate.
Oh, yeah, I do. So, let's start from the top. So, originally, there were 5 men that broke into Watergate, a Democratic National Convention headquarters, and they were coming back to the building to fix some bugs on the phones. But one of the security guard noticed while they broke in that some of the doors were taped, so we phoned the police, and the 5 men were caught. Authorities thought it was weird, though, that the suspects broke into a political office, since there's not much to gain from there except for information. And that's when the allegations started.
Oh, nice. I also heard President Nixon was behind the whole thing. Do you guys know anything about that?
Well, Ethan, Richard Nixon would later, after hearing the information, deny any involvement and would later be elected as president. It came out later that Nixon's aides had tried paying quote-unquote hush money to people to commit the crime. Nixon and his aides had the plan to use the CIA to mess with the FBI's investigation of the break-in, but it was a crime and an abuse of presidential power and deliberate obstruction of justice. Nixon's aides managed to convince the burglars to plead guilty to a crime to avoid any trial. A growing handful of people, including the Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, a trial judge John J. Sirica, and members of the Senate Investigating Committee, had begun to suspect that there was a larger scheme afoot.
Thank you. I also have one last question. How did people know of Nixon's involvement in the break-in?
A handful of Nixon's aides, including White House counsel John Dean, testified before a grand jury about the president's crimes. They also testified that Nixon had secretly taped every controversial conversation that took place in the Oval Office. If prosecutor could get their hands on those tapes, they would have proof of the president's guilt. His lawyer also argued that the president's executive privilege allowed him to keep the tapes to himself, but Judge Secura, the Senate committee, and the independent special prosecutor named Archibald Cox were also determined to obtain them. Archibald Cox stopped demanding the tapes after a while and was later ordered to be fired by Richard Nixon, while led to 7 Justice Department officials resigning out of the protest for the decision. In July, the Supreme Court ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes. While the president dragged his feet, the House Judiciary Committee voted to impeach Nixon for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, criminal cover-up, and several violations of the Constitution. On August 5th, Nixon released the tapes, which provided undeniable evidence of his complicity in the Watergate crimes. Later on August 8th, with his impeachment right around the corner, Nixon gives a speech saying it is a terrible thing to resign as president because it will leave the country in disarray, and then he announces his resignation as president.
Appreciate it, boys. Hopefully I get an A+ on my project. Thank you guys for the information.